subscribe, hit that notification bell, and smash the like button. You won't believe the darkness that can hide behind a penthouse view. Imagine loving a man who could buy you the world, literally, only to have him look you in the eye and order you to terminate your pregnancy. This isn't just a story about a breakup. It's about a man who chose a $400 million deal over his own blood. 4 years later, he saw 2 little girls, spitting images of himself, and realized he hadn't just lost a woman. He had erased 4 years of a life he never knew he was meant to live. Can a late-blooming love stand a chance? Or are there mistakes so deep, life simply doesn't grant a second chance? Watch until the end, because the final moment will shock you. Part 1. The $400 million abortion. The sound of rain hitting the glass was barely a whisper, as if the sky was trying to say what Sarah couldn't. She sat rigid on the edge of the pristine white leather couch in their 39th floor New York apartment. Her hand trembled around a mug of cold Earl Grey. No music, no TV, just the silence, punctuated by the persistent drizzle and the thumping chaos of a city that never stops, even when someone's heart, like hers, just has. Ethan Vance, her fiancé, was less than 10 feet away in the bedroom, yet he felt miles away. Since he walked in from work, he hadn't uttered more than 3 dry, clipped sentences. The news she carried in her chest, caught between her ribs, hadn't even earned the space for a hug. She had braced for surprise, for doubt, even anger. But what she got was a wall, a blank, impenetrable stare, and the word he used to end the conversation: abortion. It was delivered without a sigh, without a flicker of hesitation. Sarah bit her lip to stop the tears. Not out of pride, but because crying in front of him would feel like begging. And she had already done that once, years ago, when her doctor suggested changing her birth control due to side effects. Ethan hesitated back then, too. Everything with him was calculation, decision, control. Now, facing him, pregnant, with cold hands and a constricted heart, she no longer saw the Ethan who whisked her off for helicopter dinners or read her poetry on lazy Sunday mornings. She saw the executive, the man in the designer suit who knew everything about profit margins and nothing about tenderness. "This will ruin everything, Sarah," he had stated, his voice low and firm, like someone announcing a budget cut. She couldn't even reply. Her body went stiff, frozen from the inside out. Ethan stood by the window, his back to her, watching the city as if searching for an escape, a justification, a way not to face what he was doing. "I thought," her voice cracked, "I thought you'd react differently." Ethan finally turned, and the look he gave her was pure steel. "This isn't the time for romantic notions, Sarah. You know we have the Canadian deal, a $400 million investment on the line. A scandal now, a poorly timed baby. It's not just your life at stake." She held her silence. She wasn't sure what hurt more, the substance of his words, or the ice-cold delivery. "And if I say no?" she risked. Her voice barely a whisper. He took a sharp breath, running a hand over his face to maintain composure. He walked slowly towards her, crouching down. He touched her hand, not with affection, but with finality. "Then we'll know you've made a decision, and you will deal with the consequences. Alone." She pulled her hand away. Her stomach churned. The marble floors, the elegant lamps, everything that once seemed beautiful now felt disgusting, because this place was soaked in him, the man she thought she knew. She rose slowly, already saying goodbye. She walked to the closet, packed a small suitcase, a coat, the blue dress she liked to wear on days she felt pretty, her toothbrush, and the envelope with her doctor's reports. She paused at the nightstand, looking at the framed photo of them smiling in Montauk. She almost took it, but stopped. That image belonged to another woman, the woman who believed love was enough. When she returned to the living room, Ethan was still standing there, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "I'm not going to argue with you, Sarah," he said without emotion. "Just do the right thing." She almost laughed. The right thing? For whom? She walked past him, opened the door, and stepped into the silent hallway. She turned back one last time. "You've lost much more than you can possibly imagine, Ethan." And then she was gone. Part 2. 2 heartbeats in the dark. She walked for hours through the slick streets of Queens, her shoes soaked, the small suitcase dragging her arm. She didn't know where she was going, only what she was leaving behind. Him, and the cruel logic of a man who didn't know how to love. She paused under a damp awning. Her phone vibrated in her purse. She knew it was him. She knew he would try to rationalize, probably with numbers or empty promises. But in that moment, what she felt most wasn't rage, but clarity. A sharp, clean, almost violent understanding. She was alone, completely alone, but inside her, 2 small lives were beating, fragile, silent, but hers. Sarah placed her hand on her still flat stomach. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and knew with a certainty that transcended logic. The journey began here. No luxury, no security, no solid ground, but with courage. She took the first step, then another. The pain in her heart persisted, but something new was growing, something that even Ethan Vance couldn't destroy. Days later, her wanderings led her to a small, unassuming street in Astoria. The smell of fresh, warm bread cut through the damp air. She stopped outside a tiny lit doorway. Maria's Bakery. The name sounded comforting. She pushed the door open. A bell jingled. A woman with hair pulled back in a floral apron, her hands covered in flour, looked up. "Miss, are you all right?" Sarah forced a smile. "I just needed to catch my breath. Sorry to bother you." Maria dried her hands and gestured to a corner chair. "Sit. I'll put the kettle on." Sarah sank onto the worn wooden chair and let out a sigh that seemed to hold all the hours she'd spent holding the world up, alone. Maria returned with a cup of tea and without judgment, a warm, buttered roll. Sarah took the first bite and cried. Not because of the taste, but because it was the first time since leaving that apartment that someone had offered her something with no expectation of return. "Where are you sleeping tonight?" Maria asked gently. Sarah looked at the empty cup. I can find a shelter." "Nonsense," Maria said firmly. "I have a small room in the back. It was my grandson's. You can stay until you decide what to do." That night, Sarah slept truly and deeply for the first time in days. In the following weeks, there were no grand speeches, just the rhythm of rising before dawn, the hard work of scrubbing pans and kneading dough. The physical exhaustion helped silence her mind. Maria, an old-school pragmatist, didn't ask names. She just scheduled an appointment at the neighborhood clinic and went with Sarah. "They are 2 heartbeats," the doctor said, smiling tenderly as she heard the double rhythm on the monitor. Twins. 2 lives, 2 destinies, beating within her. The news shattered her. She wept in the clinic bathroom, embracing her coat, feeling impossibly small and yet immense. "I don't know if I can do this," she confessed later, her head resting on her arms at the bakery table. "You can," Maria said, serving her hot soup. "There is no force more brutal than a single mother's will, child. And you, my dear, are a double-dose mother now." Sarah smiled through her tears. It wasn't courage she felt, but a fierce necessity. The months passed, marked by the smell of bread, doctor visits, and silent nights where fear sat at the foot of her bed. Sometimes, she thought of Ethan. She wanted to hate him, but the pain was too deep to simplify into rage. It was a constant absence, a void that appeared every time she felt the babies move. She wrote one letter, not for revenge, but for closure. I did what you asked. I'm leaving. There is no longer a place for me here. She left it in his apartment. She never got a reply. The twin girls were born on a misty morning, much like the night she had left. Chloe was the first to cry, a feisty little thing. Mia followed with a long, tranquil sigh, as if she was born understanding that life is made of waiting. Sarah held them and knew that she had everything she needed. Not luxury, but an instinctive, absolute love. What do you think was going through Sarah's mind when she first held the twins? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Part 3. 4 years of silence and gold. Ethan Vance woke up every day at 5:40 a.m. His body knew the time. A silent, automatic discipline. The motorized blinds of his penthouse opened, flooding the vast, polished marble floor with sunlight. He was a machine, infallible, tireless, brilliant. Forbes praised him. CEOs envied him. He was named Global Businessman of the Year, but he knew. He knew something was missing. He filled the void with deals, international panels, and social invites. But after Sarah left, the world began to feel too symmetrical. He didn't cry, didn't lament, but there were nights when the silence in the apartment was so dense, even the hum of the HVAC couldn't pierce it. That's when he'd see her, not as she left, but as she was in the mornings, hair loosely tied, the scent of lavender, calling him dramatic for ordering chef-prepared meals on a Monday. He tried to push the images away, but they lingered. Once, during a vital board meeting, an assistant's tone of voice echoed hers, and he choked on his own sentence. He believed she would come back. Every time the doorbell rang, he held his breath. Every cell phone notification made his heart clench for half a second. But nothing. No message, no call, no scandal. She had disappeared with a calm that unnerved him. Her letter was direct. No drama, no threats. Just a silence between the lines that screamed more than any shout. In the ensuing months, Ethan dove deeper into work. He signed contracts, created a new biotech division, made the cover of Global Entrepreneur magazine. But at the end of the day, the reflection in the mirror showed a man collecting accolades and losing in sleep. He started drinking wine more often, a solitary ritual. The dining table was too long, the silver cutlery never used. The bed built for two now, a fortress for one, restless body. One night, he found her light blue scarf in a drawer. It smelled of the past. He could have tossed it, but he folded it and put it back. Pride. It was always his pride, the force that stopped him from following her, that silenced him when he read the letter, that made him believe he was right. But deep down, he knew the heaviest thing wasn't her absence. It was his own. He never allowed himself to think about the pregnancy. He never imagined a future with a child. To him, children were variables. Too unpredictable. One night, after a late meeting, he sat on the couch in his suit and stared at the empty screen of his turned-off TV. For the first time in years, he whispered, "Sarah." The sound of his own voice startled him. It sounded strange. It sounded human. But it was too late. She wasn't waiting on the other side of the city. She was gone for good, and he had let her go not through force, but through omission. That's what was eating at him. Not the loss, but his own abandonment. During a recent conference in Zurich, he spotted a young woman, heavily pregnant, in the audience, and nearly lost his footing mid-sentence. On the flight back, he stared out the window for hours, not at the sky, but at the life he failed to face in time. Ethan was living as if nothing had changed, but he knew. In Sarah's absence, something inside him was fundamentally broken. Don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear this story. Part 4. Two identical faces 4 years later. Ethan Vance sat in the pristine waiting room of New York Presbyterian Hospital, his leather briefcase on his knees, his phone in his hand, answering emails. Quick, direct, indifferent. The room was functional, sterile. Nothing suggested tragedy or beauty. Then he looked up. It was fast, a blur at the edge of his vision, the quiet scuff of tiny shoes on the polished floor. He looked up, almost on instinct, and froze. Time split in two. She was walking slowly down the side corridor. Jeans, a simple cotton shirt, hair in a messy bun, a slightly hurried gait. Beside her, two little girls walked hand in hand. Twins. Small, but with defined features, large, serious eyes, and unruly bangs. They wore matching white sneakers and identical yellow jackets, each clutching a colorful lunchbox. Ethan rose slowly, not yet understanding. He only knew. Sarah. She was real, not a memory, not a phantom of a sleepless night. She was here, breathing the same air. And the girls were him. The hospital noise faded. All he could see was her stride, the firmness with which she held their hands, and the exact way one of the girls frowned as they passed the reception desk, a gesture so familiar it disarmed him. Ethan couldn't move his legs. Sarah saw him. It was subtle, but she'll have him. She paused for 1 second, as if time had reached out and grabbed her too. Her eyes met his, and there was nothing there that resembled rage or surprise. It was a dense silence, laden with unspoken memory. Her eyes didn't gleam, didn't waver. She looked at him the way one recognizes a door that was once home, but will never open again. Then, without a word, she turned her face and continued walking. The girls followed, oblivious to the storm of that reunion. Ethan didn't move. He felt his knees give way. His hands were slick with sweat. He stumbled back into the chair. Someone called his name, a foreign executive with whom he was supposed to sign a contract. But he didn't hear. All he could think was, they were my daughters, and I didn't know them. What struck him hardest wasn't the obvious resemblance, the eyes, the chin, the shape of their small hands. What broke him was the realization that they existed. They were real, growing up with other routines, other dreams, other stories, and he was a part of none of it. 4 years separated them. 4 whole years that he thought were merely silence, but had been infancy. First words, first steps, laughter, cries, kindergarten, lullabies. And he missed it all. In that sterile hospital waiting room, Ethan felt a pain he couldn't name. It wasn't simple regret. It was a strange kind of mourning, a loss that came not from death, but from his own failure. It took him minutes to stand up. He stumbled to the reception desk. Did anyone see a woman with 2 girls? The receptionist, too cheerful for his state, smiled. Oh, yes, they were here earlier. One of them scraped her knee. They left. Ethan wanted to ask for her name, but something stopped him. Maybe the old pride, maybe the new shame. He walked back to his car. In the penthouse, he sat on the dark sofa, looking down at the city. Now, the view was different. The city seemed too vast, because somewhere within it were 3 people who should be part of his world, and he had let them slip away. He searched his phone for Sarah's name. Nothing. No saved number. No social media. She had disappeared with surgical precision. He finally whispered into the empty room what he should have screamed 4 years ago. I love you. But no speech could fit that look she had given him before she turned away. That look said, you had your chance, and you wasted it. Yet something deep inside him began to stir. It was absence. It was truth. It was late, but perhaps not entirely. If you were Ethan, what would you do next? How do you think you could possibly fix 4 years of abandonment? Let me know in the comments. Part 5. Learning to be real. The next morning, Ethan canceled everything. The meeting with the Swiss, the investor lunch, nothing mattered. For the first time in years, he had something more urgent to do. He tracked down the bakery's address through a discreet private investigator. The neighborhood was on the other side of the city, a humble area where his luxury car was conspicuously out of place. He stopped a few blocks away, preferring to walk. He wanted to arrive smaller, less to him. He bought a bunch of fresh daisies at a corner market. They weren't sophisticated, but their simplicity felt real. He hesitated at the low, peeling blue iron gate. He could hear voices inside. Children's laughter, the clatter of a pot. The sweet scent of baked bread wafted through the cracks in the window. Ethan took a deep breath and rang the bell. Sarah opened the door seconds later, as if she knew it was him. Her hair was held up with a simple clip, her clothes casual. No makeup, no defense other than her steady gaze. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was devoid of surprise, but sharp. Ethan held out the flowers, his hand shaking. "I didn't come to cause trouble. I wanted to see you, to talk." She took the flowers automatically, resting them on the doorframe without inviting him in. "Now you want to meet your daughters, after throwing me out like garbage?" He lowered his gaze for a second, then looked back up, holding her stare. "I have no excuses, no justifications, only regret. I didn't come to ask for forgiveness from you or from them. It wouldn't be fair. But I want to be present if you let me. For them." Sarah studied him. A war raged in her eyes. "For them," she finally agreed. "I allow it, but with conditions." Ethan nodded instantly. "No empty promises," she said firmly. "Park visits only, with me present. No expensive gifts or photographers. One step at a time. You do not enter this house, and if you disappear again, don't ever come back." He was stunned, not by the conditions, but by the clarity with which she saw him. "I accept," he said. "All terms." A moment of silence passed. Then, from inside, a small voice called out, "Mommy, the bread is ready." Sarah turned her face, then looked back at him. "Saturday at 10, Astoria Park." "I'll be there," he replied. He started to turn, but heard her voice, softer now, almost an echo. "Ethan." He turned back. "Their names are Chloe and Mia." He blinked. For the first time, he felt his breath leave his lungs. "Thank you for telling me." Sarah didn't reply, simply closing the gate softly. Ethan started treating Saturdays with a new kind of urgency. Not the anxiety of deals, but something simpler, more intimate. He showed up wearing simple jeans and a clear shirt. He had to be humble, empty-handed, and his heart too. At the park, Chloe, the bolder one, ran to him with the enthusiasm of someone who held no past. Mia, more reserved, watched him, but the distance between them slowly diminished. On one of those Saturdays, Chloe tripped and fell, scraping her knee. The cry was big. Ethan knelt in the sand, pulled a tissue from his pocket, and gently cleaned her knee. Then, he took out a small adhesive bandage, a random cartoon one he'd carried in his wallet since the first visit. As he applied it, she looked at him through her tears. "You look like a daddy." Ethan froze. The world slowed. He looked at Sarah, who was watching from afar, still. "Maybe," he replied with a slight smile. "I'm trying to be one." Chloe hugged his neck without thinking. Mia slowly approached and rested her hand on his shoulder. In that instant, Ethan knew. The opportunity was there, and everything he did from that moment on had to be real. He wasn't trying to redeem himself anymore. He was trying to earn it. Part 6. The wounds of the past months later. On a chilly night, Ethan arrived with fresh soup and bread. Sarah hesitated at the door, then made a simple gesture. "Come in," but only to eat. They ate in silence at the small table, the steam from the soup rising in the warm, simple atmosphere. The girls were asleep. That night, Sarah found him sitting on the sofa with a mug of tea after the girls were asleep. She sat in the armchair opposite him. She crossed her arms and let out a long, slow breath. "I had to give birth alone," she said softly. In fear, in pain, not knowing if both of them would be okay, or if I could even care for them. Ethan didn't move. He listened, knowing this was not just venting. It was a delivery of truth. Chloe had the cord wrapped around her neck. She continued. Mia was born with a fever. They went straight to an incubator. I was shaking so hard I couldn't sign the hospital papers. Maria held my hand, and all you did was disappear. Silent, precise, a surgical cut. Ethan lowered his gaze. There was no defense. "I hated you," she said, even quieter. "For a long time. Not for leaving me, but for making it seem like everything I was disposable, a mistake in your grand plan." He closed his eyes, then looked directly at her. "I was a coward, Sarah." "I know," she said. Without blinking, I confused power with coldness. I was taught that feelings are clutter, that a real man doesn't get too involved. But I loved you. I just didn't know what to do with it. The pregnancy showed me a kind of life I didn't know, and I did what I always do with what frightens me. I pushed it away. Sarah was silent. There was a fragile crack in her eyes. "I don't expect your forgiveness," he said, leaning forward. "But I need you to know that being with them now, these past months, it showed me how much I lost. And I'm not talking about guilt. I'm talking about love. For them. And for you too. Even if there's no place for me here anymore." The silence stretched, heavy and profound. Sarah walked to the window, turning her back to the empty street. "You know why I let you stay for dinner tonight?" He didn't answer. "Because Chloe asked me if she could call you Daddy." The silence of that question cut me like a knife, and I was afraid you would disappear again, afraid they would feel the pain I felt. But then I realized that if you left now, it would hurt them just as much, because you are already part of them. You're already in. She turned around, her eyes damp but steady. "So I had to accept that maybe you are changing." "I'm trying to be," he said softly, "for the first time in my life." "I know," she replied with simple honesty. A step separated them, a whole past behind, an uncertain future ahead. Sarah took half a step closer. "Forgiving you will take time, maybe a lot of time. But the girls love you, and that matters more than anything I feel." He nodded. In that gesture, without a single word, she hadn't given him a chance, but a truth. He didn't embrace her, didn't hold her hand. But her eyes, for the first time in years, were no longer on guard. And that was enough. Conclusion. A home not built of marble. There was no smooth music, no final kiss. There was just a silence that no longer hurt, a quiet that rested between two people who had finally allowed themselves to stop running. Ethan started sleeping there some nights, not by formal invitation, but by a naturalness that slowly emerged. He would wake up before sunrise, helping Sarah prepare the girls' lunch boxes. He stopped checking his phone. When the office called, he would answer firmly. "I'm with my daughters now. I'll call back later." He played on the floor with them, learned the names of their dolls, and how to detangle their hair after baths, even though Chloe always complained he pulled too hard. One evening, after putting the girls to bed, Sarah stood at the kitchen door, watching him load the dishwasher. "You don't have to do that," she said. "But I want to," he replied, rinsing a plate. "Are you tired?" "Being tired and grateful can go together," he said. She smiled but didn't reply. A few minutes later, the two of them sat side by side on the sofa. Their hands found each other on the cushion. Neither gripped tightly. They simply touched. A small, complete gesture. "I'm still learning to trust," she whispered. "And I'm still learning to deserve it," he answered. They sat there, the soft yellow light reflecting on the simple furniture, the walls covered in children's drawings. This was a home, not the one he had envisioned, built of marble and glass, but the one he needed, built of presence, reconciliation, burnt pancakes, and small hands that clung to his with the strength of belonging. One night, Sarah walked out of the bathroom and found Ethan asleep on the couch with Chloe and Mia resting on his chest. He was snoring softly. She sat beside him and, without thinking, took his hand. He slowly opened his eyes, groggy. He said nothing, just looked at her. In that touch, without a single word, there was more than forgiveness. There was belonging. Now tell me, could you forgive someone after all of that? I'd love to know your opinion. What would you do in Sarah's or Ethan's place? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Until the next story. Part 7. The Fragility of Trust. The Unspoken Promise. Ethan didn't go inside immediately. He sat on the swing for another 5 minutes, gazing at the slightly ajar door. It wasn't just the entrance to a small home. It was the gateway to the life he had once dismissed. In the following weeks, Ethan's presence became a rhythm. He spent Saturday mornings fixing a creaking floorboard he'd promised Mia he'd mend. He replaced a blown kitchen light. He even helped Maria with a notoriously difficult sourdough starter. Yet Sarah maintained an invisible barrier. She accepted his help, but never sought his company. She talked to him about the kids, their school schedules, the utility bills, but never about them. One Sunday evening, as Ethan was reading a bedtime story, Sarah walked into the room. She sat on the edge of the bed, watching him. Ethan, in a simple old t-shirt, his hair slightly messy, read an old fable with silly voices. He looked more like a father than he ever had in a tailored suit. After the girls were asleep, they moved to the living room. I called my lawyer, Ethan announced quietly. I'm terminating the lease on the Brooklyn penthouse. Sarah was visibly startled. She knew he had sold their Manhattan apartment, but the new, temporary penthouse lease was still active. You don't have to do that, she said. You could sublet it. No, Ethan shook his head. That apartment, it represents everything I chose over them. I can't go back there. I found a smaller place, a 2-bedroom on the Upper West Side. Closer to my office, but far enough not to be the Ethan Vance of 4 years ago. Sarah studied him. Are you trying to buy my trust with a sacrifice, Ethan? No, he answered honestly. I'm trying to live a life that has no room for selfish choices. I can't ask you to believe me if I'm holding on to the very place that reminded me of my own greed every single day. Silence settled between them. His words were raw, but the wound was deep. Do you think Sarah should be moved by Ethan's sacrifice, or is she right to remain cautious? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Part Wait, the fire test, the public confession. Midweek, Ethan faced his true test. His company was launching a massive philanthropic fund. His PR director had arranged an exclusive interview with Forbes magazine about his shift from cold CEO to conscious philanthropist. The interview was set for Friday morning in his office. Perfect lighting, expensive tie, prepared answers. The goal was to cleanse his image after years of being perceived as a ruthless capitalist. By the third question, the sharp-tongued interviewer, Brenda, steered toward his private life. It's widely known you've had a major personal upheaval, particularly a sudden split. Did loneliness drive you towards this sudden turn to charity, Mr. Vance? Ethan felt the familiar boardroom tension. He was supposed to give a generic answer, but the Ethan of today couldn't. He looked straight into the camera, not searching for public approval, but for the faces of his 2 little girls and Sarah. It wasn't loneliness, Ethan said, his voice deep and steady. It was loss. Brenda leaned in. Could you elaborate? For years, Ethan continued, I built a career on eliminating variables. I believed I could control everything. But I was wrong. I made a terrible mistake. I abandoned the people I loved, and most importantly, I abandoned my twin daughters, believing they would obstruct my plan." He paused, swallowing hard. "That is the truth. I'm not doing charity to hide it. I'm doing the work to earn forgiveness. I missed the first 4 years of my children's lives, and no amount of money or fame can buy that back. This change isn't a PR strategy. It's an attempt to repair my soul." The room was silent. Ethan's PR director looked like she was about to faint. Close-up shot on Ethan's eyes, sincere, unrepentant. Part 9. The unexpected guest. The old world's challenge. That afternoon, Sarah received a call from Maria, her voice laced with worry. "Sarah, a very fancy car is parked outside. An older gentleman, impeccably dressed, is asking for you." Sarah's stomach clenched. "Who is it, Maria?" "He says he is Ethan's father." Sarah nearly dropped the phone. She knew of Ethan's father, Mr. Douglas Vance, a legendary financier who had taught his son that emotion was a liability. She had never met him, but she felt the cold pressure of his disapproval. She rushed home. The black limousine idled on the corner, and Douglas Vance stood by the gate with a look of icy disdain. "Miss Sarah," he said, his tone razor-sharp. "I know what my son is doing here. I know he canceled a lease and derailed a critical interview. I came here to be clear." Sarah stood tall, refusing to back down. "What is it you want, Mr. Vance?" "My son is destroying himself over a romantic mistake. Yes, he has children. Their names are in the trust. But you and this meager life are compromising his career and his assets. I will offer you a deal. A large house in the suburbs, a substantial trust fund for the girls, and a guarantee of full financial support. In return," Sarah held up her hand, cutting him off. "In return, I disappear from his life again? In return, I take the money and teach my daughters that love and family can be bought." She managed a small, bitter smile. "I apologize, Mr. Vance. I've already had one man try to put a price on my life. I wouldn't take it then, and I certainly won't take it now. My daughters and I are not variables you can remove from your son's balance sheet." Just then, Ethan's car pulled up. He got out, seeing his father and Sarah standing in confrontation. His face hardened instantly. "What are you doing here, father?" Ethan asked, his voice colder than the day he demanded the abortion 4 years prior. "I came to save you from this disaster," Douglas Vance growled. "I offered her a deal. Pay her off to leave." Ethan looked at his father, then at Sarah, who stood unyielding, her head held high. He walked over and placed his hand on Sarah's shoulder, a public protective gesture he had never made before. "Father," Ethan said, his tone final, "the only disaster in my life was the day I listened to you and chose money over family. I won't make that mistake again. I don't need your money, and Sarah and my children are not for sale." Douglas Vance glared at his son with utter disappointment. "You will regret this. You have lost everything." "No," Ethan countered, a genuine smile touching his lips as he looked at Sarah. "I have just found everything." Douglas Vance gave Sarah one last contemptuous look, got into his car, and drove away. Ethan exhaled. He turned to Sarah, his face a mixture of gratitude and trembling relief. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for what he did." "Don't be sorry," Sarah said, her voice filled with new resolve. "Be thankful for the choice you made." She leaned into him slightly. It wasn't a hug, not forgiveness, but a vital acknowledgement that Ethan had passed the hardest test of all. They survived the storm, but is Ethan's choice enough to rebuild a family? Can Sarah truly forgive and accept him? The future remains an open question. Tell me, which of Ethan's actions was the most important for Sarah? And what would you do if you were Douglas Vance? Don't forget to like and subscribe.